I want to follow up last week's talk on what a master shot is with just talking more about building a shot list, because this is definitely something that I see semester after semester that my students struggle with. And, for anybody who's starting out and trying to figure out how to pre-visualize their stories and then turn that into a shot list, that transition is one of the trickiest parts that people seem to not quite fully understand. So we talked last week about how the master shot is typically a wide shot of your entire scene. So it's like a oneer of your scene. And it establishes the geography of the place and the characters in the scene and what they're doing and the props and the continuity that you have to follow. So that's kind of one of the benefits of it. It also lets the actors kind of get into their performance for the scene. And then you can kind of cover it from other angles. That's the idea of coverage, is to go in through other angles. And you can cover the whole scene over and over again from different angles. That gives you your most editing options. Or you can be more surgical about it and especially if you're running out of time, make decisions like, okay, we're just going to cover this line in the dialogue in the close-up, or this moment, we want to get these things, and you can kind of surgically do it. But the idea of a shot list is to have an efficient, a kind of logical progression for production so that you can utilize your time wisely. It allows you to focus on performance. And again, it's your playbook for production, for that day of production or for that scene. And it doesn't mean that it can't change or adjust, and sometimes you have to adjust because something in the location isn't working exactly how you thought it would, or something else happens, or you have a new idea. Production, the point of preparation is that it helps you run more efficiently, which means then when these new ideas come up, you have the time and the space to adjust or to add them to the plan. And sometimes you have to come up with new ideas on the fly because you don't have time and you need to adjust. But again, the preparation helps you understand what you need from the scene, or what you want ideally from the scene. And then that gives you a foundation to then discover, which I think is one of the most exciting things about production and why I'm such a firm believer in preparation. It doesn't kill spontaneity. It doesn't kill the creative process. It actually allows for it to bloom, in my opinion. So what I think people get stuck with, and that I see kind of going from storyboard to shot list with my students, is that they think of each shot in the storyboard as a shot they need to get, and then they don't really think about the process of production and what's the most efficient process. So if anybody has watched Robert Rodriguez's 10-minute film school, which I highly recommend, it's the kind of break all the rules while understanding version of how to shoot a film, where essentially he does shoot it almost like an edit in camera, where he's got a zoom lens. He's not covering anything in a master. He's not covering it from different angles or, different lenses, but he's making it look like he is by recording one line in a wide shot, punching in for the next line, zooming back out for the next line, punching back in. And so he's not giving himself editing choices. He's making those choices as he's shooting it. So he's stuck with what he's got. Now, it worked really well for him. It can work. I've shot projects like that myself. And again, the preparation and the understanding of what you want is key. You can't just do it on the fly. um, but that's kind of not protocol. And so, especially as an educator, I'm always trying to teach the most professional protocol that we can follow, because even if your project is small and it doesn't really matter, you're only shooting one day, it's not a whole lot. The goal is to grow, right? And to get bigger and bigger, and to have more setups, and to have more locations, and to have these logistical questions. And so if your protocol is already in place for a small project, but you're and that protocol is modeled after a big project, then you can get to that big project without having to kind of reconfigure your working style. So one of the things that's interesting about the storyboard to shot list move, and also one of the things that you'll often see in the edits of scenes, is that the master shot, that wide shot, it might not be a shot that you use in your edit very much, which I think cultivates this misunderstanding of the master shot being an establishing shot, because it's what you start with, but then you never go back to it. I like to use the opening scene from Pulp Fiction as an example, because it doesn't start out with its master shot. Not if you look at all the shots that are used in the edit for that scene. There's actually a wider, what I would consider master shot, that includes the final stick 'em up moment, but that shot isn't used in the edit until the very last edit of the scene. We never see that wider master. But that, from my opinion, would be the master that you shoot the entire scene and start out with on your production day. And then you get in closer for the two shot that we see throughout the edit. So if we use that scene as an example and kind of storyboard each shot, obviously it's a conversation, so there's a lot of back and forth. And typically in a storyboard, you wouldn't necessarily storyboard exactly every single line of dialogue in this way. But essentially, this is what a storyboard is. Each moment and how we're seeing each moment in the pre-visualization of the edit of this scene. So we're starting out on this single on her. And then we cut to an over-the-shoulder on Tim Roth's character. And it kind of goes back and forth, and we have a variety of shots that are singles. We have over the shoulders. There's actually kind of a dolly push in. And you see, when you kind of look at what I call a contact sheet, because that's what an old school film photography reference is, of all the different thumbnails of these shots that have been edited together, you see the repetition start of like, oh, okay, this is from the same take, or at least the same camera setup, right? And so those are not individual shots that you list on a shot list. What you're listing is the camera setup that will get you that shot. And so from the storyboard to shot list transfer, you take that storyboard and you look at it and you go, okay, what shots here are repeated from the same camera angle? And sometimes it's helpful to look at an overhead of your scene and your location, and to think about where the camera is literally to capture that camera. And that is where production efficiency becomes the name of the game with a shot list, because you want to try and shoot everything that you can from that angle before you move. And so that means, it's easier to swap lenses. That's a really quick camera change or a camera setup change. But if you want to flip the world, which is, if we go from shooting all of her coverage to shooting all of his coverage, well, depending on the location, if you've got a bunch of crew and equipment and lights and people standing around and monitors and things like that, like you have to move all of that in order to flip and shoot the other direction. And so that can be a very long change and time in production. So that's where you want to kind of think about building your efficiency when you move the camera. And so you usually want to, like I said, shoot everything from a particular camera setup before you move. If there are characters like minors or other actors that you need to release early, then you prioritize their coverage. But typically, you want to shoot the most important stuff. So if you have, say, a diner scene like the Pulp Fiction one, and one character is clearly the main character, you want to prioritize their coverage before you shoot the other person's coverage. Because, again, like I said last week with the master shot, if the apocalypse happens and your production gets shut down, at least you have coverage of the most important character in that scene. So, and again, so you want to prioritize the time that you're spending on the things that actually matter. And then with whatever time you have left, you're like, okay, now we can just surgically get this, this, and this, and whatever else you need from the coverage if you're running out of time. And so that helps, looking at, the storyboard that we've created with these thumbnails, crossing out which ones are repeat shots from the same camera setup. That tells us, looking at the overhead, okay, this is where our master shot is coming from, this is where our over the shoulder is coming from, and this is where our single is coming from. And we're going to shoot coverage, the whole scene, ideally. We're going to shoot as much of the scene as we need from each of these angles. Now, this scene happens to have kind of like two masters because it has like a wider shot, which is the last one. But then most of the scene lives in this closer to shot. So those are, and that's kind of common as well. But from again, from a production efficiency standpoint, you tend to kind of go from out to in. And then again, insert shots, like the hand with the gun, those are things that can be cheated or picked up on another day. That doesn't even need to be Tim Roth's hand. We don't see his face. It doesn't even have to be that location. We can find a table that looks like it and light it and shoot it. And those are the things that get cut when you're running out of time. So from a production efficiency standpoint, you would start from that widest master, which also covers the entire scene and has that moment where they stand up and stick up the diner. Then you would cut in, move in closer, swap out lenses, whichever's the better choice from the director's standpoint. And you had that master 2 shot, which you're going to use. Then, because you're already there, it's easy for you to swap lenses and punch in for the close-up on the kiss. And now the choice is, which direction do you go in first? Do you cover her? Do you cover him? Now, because of the insert of the gun and the direction of that, you could shoot that direction first because there's a little bit more to cover from that side. But because of the way of the edit, and there might be matching coverage, I don't know exactly what they shot, but there is a bit of a kind of dolly push in on the over the shoulder to Tim Roth's character. So if we go to the over the shoulder first, we've got this kind of move, and then we land in what is the over the shoulder shot on him. And then we can go over to the single on him, and then we flip the world, coming all the way around. Now, because you're set up for the single on him, again, You could choose to cover the single on her first because the lens is already set up and everything. Or you can kind of, from a production protocol standpoint, do the over the shoulder. And then since you're there, punch in for that insert on the gun if you have time. Again, that's something that can easily get replicated later. So you could cut that if you're running out of time to then finish on the single on her. But, there are different ways to kind of cut it. Again, it's about what is most efficient, who are the most important characters, what's most important for the scene, and how you are covering it to give yourself options in the edit to tell the story, or at least to get what you need to tell the story as a movie.